Well, I guess we'll just go ahead and get started. Welcome. I wanted to say thanks for coming to the event today. PSP puts on a really good event, and I think this is one of the best ones. I think some of the events that we do as vendors often become commercials for our talents and our skills and our products. And I believe that this program is without a doubt the best that benefits the state employees and the projects. My name is John Blair. I am a vice president with Public Consulting Group. We are a national consulting group that is involved in all facets of IT consulting. I got selected to do this because I guess I'm old. And my gray hair is starting to show that. I want to tell you that you're in the best session because Project Delivery 101 will help you keep your hair from turning gray like mine. Yeah, if I had 2 years to live, I would want to do it working on a IT project because they last forever. You know, what's interesting about this, we have a great skill set of people working on that are going to be on the panel today, and some of our presenters have literally, we probably combined have well over 150 years of experience in this business, and that frightens me. We've gone through you know, the highs and the lows, and hopefully we can help you avoid it. What I'd like to do is help you avoid the lows. What I'd like to do is ask, how many in this room have actually headed up a project? It's interesting. It's interesting. This is about what I predicted. It looked close to about a third to a half, but half of you haven't, all right? And without a doubt, the right planning, the right execution of an IT project makes your life so much simpler and better. There is no greater satisfaction that you will get in your career than delivering an IT project on time and on budget and with a successful rollout. But I'll tell you something, it is fraught with peril. It is fraught with frustration, and if the better that you plan, the better that you understand the process up front, the more successful you will be. Today, we have on our speaker panel, we have Mr. David Westphalen, who is one of our directors at Public Consulting Group, Francisco Lujano, who is a branch chief at California Department of Technology, Marnell Voss, who I asked her earlier, I said, Marnell, how long have you been doing this? And she said, 22 years, and she goes, but by 22 years, I'm one of the babies of the organization. And that is so true. We have a deep talent base within the state, and often 20 years is just where you're getting started. And then lastly, presenting during the presentation will be Tina John, who is one of our consultants at PCG. We're going to talk about, we have a little bit of an educational briefing on Project Delivery 101, and then we're going to have fun and play a game. Those of you that participate will actually leave here with a gift today. But you got to take notes. These questions are not easy. So take notes during the presentation because some of the questions that you'll be asked. And then closing out today, what we're going to do is we're going to have a roundtable discussion of critical success factors. And I absolutely think this is the most valuable part of the session today. So please think about your questions. And you can be very pointed. These folks here have many, many years of experience of successful projects that have been instrumental to the way that California executes its business. So I really want to encourage you to ask questions and don't be afraid because this is where you're going to cut your teeth and this is where you're going to learn your lessons. So I'd like to kick it off, introduce David Westphalen, and he's going to talk to you about the process.
Good morning. So I'm here to talk about a little bit of project delivery and the PMBOK in general and kind of the software development lifecycle as a whole and how it fits in with some of the standards. So the key thing is industry standards, which ones do I need to know about? Well, there's a lot of standards out there, and for, you need to have standards so that you can point to something in your project. People have done this before, so you don't need to reinvent the wheel every single time you go to do an IT project. So we do standards. Hit the right one. So some of the most common standards that we use on IT projects in the state of California is the Project Management Institute has the PMBOK, which is the Project Management Body of Knowledge. What that does is it's a framework of project management processes broken out into knowledge areas, which there are 10 of, and then in those knowledge areas there's across the 10 knowledge areas there's 5 process groups, and then there's 47 processes within those groups according with the PMBOK 5. So that's one of the most important ones for setting up your PMO and getting your plans in place to go ahead with your project. Another important one for industry standards is IEEE, which is the Institute of Electrical and Electronics Engineers. These are a lot of detailed plans of technology, and the purpose is to foster technology, innovation, and excellence. For the California state projects, a lot of times you'll hear of the IEEE standards from your IV&V vendor. They're going against the standard. 1012 is the Software Verification and Validation Plan, which makes sure that your project is following good processes and from a technical perspective. Then there's the National Institute of Standards and Technology, which is NIST. It's a federal agency, and they're focused on measurement standards. This is most popular in IT project delivery because it's a focus on security and security controls. Then you have the International Organization for Standardization, which is ISO. This is a non-government body created to share knowledge and develop voluntary, consensus-based, market-relevant international standards. One of the ones that the most popular for the state of California is ISO 9001, which is the quality, and then ISO 27001, which is security. And then we have the Information Technology Infrastructure Library, which is ITIL. This is focused really on service management and organization, and to make sure that IT services are aligned with the needs of the business. ITIL describes processes, procedures, tasks, and checklists, all focused on service management. There's various certification levels from ITIL, and you can be a foundation person, which I am, all the way up to a full-time practitioner that makes sure that your organization follows all the ITIL service management processes. So project lifecycle and SDLC lifecycle. So SDLC, software development lifecycle, what are they and how are they related? Taking a look at the project lifecycle, at the most basic level, the project lifecycle is concerned with management of the various components of the project, whereas the SDLC is focused on the development and implementation of the system and the software. There are many models of the SDLC with slight variation, so we decided to utilize the PMBOK model for project lifecycle since it's a highly recognized standard, and for the SDLC, we're going to talk about the waterfall model currently, and then Tina will talk a little bit later about waterfall versus agile if that's the model you choose for your project. So the project management lifecycle, John just joked if he had only 2 years to live, he'd want to be on an IT project because they seem to last forever. But the key concept from PMBOK is a project is a temporary endeavor. So it has a definite start date and a definite end date. And you're going to create a unique product, service, or you're going to have a unique result. So there's project management and then there's program management. So program management is more encompassing because that's not the final thing, and you can do project management processes throughout there. But the key thing from PMBOK to remember here is that there is definitely a beginning and an end, and you will come out with a product. The PMBOK project lifecycle is broken out into process groups. So you start with the initiating group, you move to the planning group, then you go to the executing group, and then there's a monitoring and control group, and then finally the closing group. It's important to remember, you always need to close every one of your projects out so that you can document lessons learned and file away all the documents so that they can be used on other projects going forward. So then, kind of tying that to the software development lifecycle, the software can have many different variations in their definition. One of the most common ones we'll see in first California state projects start with requirements. That's where you come up with your requirements and your specifications. You may have your use cases and your implementation approach. Then once you have all your requirements down, you'd move into system design. And that's where you'd come up with the architecture, the system components, interfaces, and any data conversion mapping that might be necessary. And then finally, once you do that, you move on to development and unit testing. So you're actually developing your code and your unit testing and making sure it can work before you send it into the testing portion of the, and so there you have many different things where you, definitions of tests, we'll have system test, integration test, and then finally user acceptance testing. So once you've got all that done, then you move on to implementation. So you deploy your system, you make sure your training's done, you make sure your data conversion's done, and in the waterfall, this all falls straight in line. You do one after the other. There might be some overlap, but in the truest sense, you don't start system design until you're done with requirements. You don't start development until you're done with your design. So you're kind of moving in a linear fashion. So then the next question is, how does that map? So how does the project lifecycle map to the SDLC? Well, the SDLC maps to the, the majority of the system development from the project management perspective is done in the planning, the executing, monitoring, and controlling buckets. The initiating is where you come up with your project concepts and get your buy-in from your stakeholders, and then you move into the planning stages, and in the planning stages you're writing all your project management plans on how you're going to run your project. And then the executing, monitoring, and controlling is everything that is building the service. And then you close the project. The life cycle for the SDLC again is the requirements, implementation approach, the system design, development and unit testing, and implementation. And that all happens in the execution phase. So one other thing we're going to look at real quick here is the PMBOK process groups. Executing, monitoring, controlling, and closing. So we're going to take a look at the first two, initiating and planning, and then kind of mix in some of the state level procurement processes, and then we'll come back to some of the other phases once we move along. So in the initiating phase, your key inputs there are going to be your business need. So if you need to have a business need to come up with this project and set forth what you're going to do. And it needs to be related to the strategic plan of the organization you're doing. So some key considerations that you're going to worry about there is your organizational readiness. You're going to set critical success factors for what you say is going to make the project successful, and any external influences that may have something to do with your project. The federal government saying that you need to do these certain things and certain standards that you must follow. So the key outputs of this is going to be, in my mind, the key outputs is the project charter and the stakeholder analysis. Because the project charter is your first cut at what our project's going to do. It's got high-level requirements in there, it's got a high-level budget, and it's got who your stakeholders are and who you're going to need to get buy-in from the top for the project to be successful. And once you complete the planning stage. Oh, that was the initiating stage, sorry. So then you have the planning phase, and then the key inputs from the the planning phase are the key outputs from your other process group. So you have your project charter and your stakeholder analysis. Now, across all the knowledge areas that there's 10 of, and I won't speak them off the top of my head because I'll forget some of them, they have all these processes in place, and they place them within each of the process groups. The great thing about it is the only time you need to memorize those 47 processes and 5 process groups is if you're going to take the test. Because once you become a project manager and you're delivering your project, you can always open up the PMBOK and go, what's that process I was supposed to do? And always fall back on that. You don't have to know everything, and it's better to fall back on it to go, oh yeah, that's right, I need this to do this process to create my project charter, and then my project charter is a key input for the next step. So, and so you also here at this point have the stakeholder analysis. And what you're looking for here is the stakeholder buy-in and engagement. Without that, your project is doomed from the start. If you don't have the top person pulling for you, well then getting the project team together isn't going to be, your success is going to be a lot less. And in this, you're going to talk about your procurement strategy and what you're going to do. Are you going to go with a COTS product? You're going to buy? You're going to create it yourself? Whatever you're going to do. And then the key outputs is this is where you write your project management plan. So you come up with your scope management plan and your schedule management plan and your time or your cost management plan and your stakeholder management plan. So all these are in the planning process group, and they are all across the different knowledge areas of the project. So here too is the key outputs is the scopes and the requirements traceability matrix. This is the requirements traceability matrix at this point is just the requirements. And you're going to then put them to your RFP or whatever procurement model you're going to use. And then you're going to go forward. So the groundwork is set in the planning phase will have a direct impact on the rest of the project. If you get behind here, you're always going to be playing catch up during the execution phase. And the time you spend playing catch up is going to negatively impact the quality of the project moving forward. So we've talked about the project initiation and planning from a PMBOK point of view. So how does that map to the state of California project approval process? Francisco is going to walk you through the California project approval lifecycle.
Good morning. So I just got back from vacation. I was out hunting in the mountains, and over 10 days we faced 10 bears or 5 bears, and I think this is a little bit more nerve-wracking than that. So let me get started first. The project approval lifecycle. We call it stage gate, and a lot of people have asked in the past, why did you guys change this? Well, the old FSR process actually would set you up for failure, because you would do your analysis, you do your estimates, you do your FSR, huge 150-page document, you'd give it to us, we'd go back and forth, we'd approve it, and then bam, you were at the equivalent of stage 2. You do your procurement, you do your RFP, you'd say, okay, we're going to do it in 6 months, it's going to cost us $20 million. A year and a half later, it's $60 million. Your deputy's in front of the legislature explaining why you can't do projects, when in fact, it wasn't the case. It's because the process set it up so you would fail. So stage gate's designed so that you can go step by step through this, and as you go through each step, you're able to gather more information, and when you're actually approved at stage 4, that's the equivalent of your execution phase, where in the old process, you'd have your vendor on board, you had your contract, and you were ready to go. So it's actually designed to help be successful. Now, just a really quick history. A lot of people think this is new. It really isn't. In 2002, Roy McBrayer, he was a retired Air Force colonel who ran the PMO office down in the research and development shop at Andrews Air Force Base, actually brought it up when he was at DeWitt. It didn't get far, and so it's really not new, and it's a concept that's been used by the federal government, different states, and different governments around the world. So the way it's listed out here is that you have to go through each step. Step 1, stage 2, stage 3, and stage 4. And a lot of departments have been complaining and said, it's going to take us forever and this just doesn't work. Well, it's really designed to be flexible, because if you're a department that's really mature and your PMO office is really mature, then you actually you can actually overlap the stages just like you do with a project management process. Because if you have plans, project management plans that you actually have in stage 4, you can start working on those ahead of time. If you have history with the system that you're developing, you might have requirements already set, and you may know what they are, so you can actually begin working on those ahead of time. So it is very flexible depending on the project, depending on the department. So just to go through it quickly, stage 1 right now, a new policy drop where your agency information officer and your agency secretary will be approving your S1BAs. If you're not part of an agency, then it still would go through the ITPOD to get approved, but we'll do it within 30 days. And in the past, what we've done is we've worked with departments to make sure that their S1BAs are strong. So you have good goals and objectives and metrics, so you know what you're producing and when you're going to be done, because your metrics are set. And you make them smart, so they're very specific, they're measurable, they're time-bound, and reasonable, because we have a lot of times where our department will come in and say, well, I have to improve whatever X, Y, and Z by 100% within 6 months. And it's like, that's not really reasonable. So we work with them to try to get reasonableness into what they're trying to do. So stage 2, the alternative analysis. And they talked about, actually, let me go back, stage 1. They did talk a little bit about that. You're identifying your problem, your business case. What is it that you need? Why do you need to do something? And so it's very important. This is the foundation of what your project's going to be about. So stage 2, your alternative analysis. So here, you assess the existing business processes. We want departments to actually go through their business processes, re-engineer them for efficiencies before they even get started. Doesn't always happen, but they do. You have your mid-level solution requirements, which we're going to talk about a little bit more later on. You figure out whether or not you're going to need COTS, MOTS, you're doing your market research. So you're really trying to figure out what your alternative solutions are going to be, what you're looking for. Stage 3, you have your solution development, which I'm going to skip over because Marnell is going to be talking about that. But it does have to do with preparing for whatever solution you're going to obtain through a procurement. So there's different options here. And then stage 4 is your readiness. You're going to have your selected vendor on board. Your solicitation will be released. So if it's an RFO, RFP, and your project readiness, do you have your project management plans in place? Is your team set? Are you ready to go forward? And then you get all your approvals, and then bam, that's where you start your project. Now in the past, that was after you did your procurement, your project was already in flight. Most of the times, you were a year and a half or 2 years late, and your project increased by three times because you were using the RFP, which was, you were really guessing at the very beginning, and that's what you were held to. So this is really much more, it's designed for success, because you've actually been able to go through this process step by step, developing information as you go, and as you get more information, then you say, okay, this is what we're looking for, this is the actual cost. So when your project starts, you have your actual cost, you have your schedule in place, and that's when you're held accountable for getting your project started. So, now if you look at this, you have the project management lifecycle, you have the project approval lifecycle, and you have SDLC overlapping. And again, in the past, at stage 2, which is the alternative analysis, that's where your FSR would be approved. Now, your project's not approved until you actually begin your execution phase. So this really does change the nature of how we're looking at what you're doing, how the public's looking at you, and how the legislature's looking at you. Because you really have a better idea of what's going on instead of guessing. And that's what we used to do. We'd guess with the best information we had. You'd write it up, we'd approve it, and then we'd hold you to it. So this is the business requirements through the stages. Again, I'm just going to touch on it really quickly because Marnell will hit on it better. But as you can see, stage 1, you have your business need and your opportunity statement. So it's pretty high level what you're looking at. Stage 2, when you're looking at your analysis of your alternative analysis, you have a mid-level requirements. You have more information, you have more detail, but it really gets to the point where stage 3, where you have your detailed solution requirements. Now, the way we work in the department, we have our critical partners and we all work together where we're working hand in hand with the procurement folks, with the architects, the ISOs. So we have a core team that works together with the departments. So it's very important when our STPD folks say, you know what, their requirements need to be stronger or more detail needs to be provided. And we understand there's a lot of pressure on you to get through this process very quickly. But if you plan ahead of time and you really have that foundation, your likelihood of success goes up dramatically. Because you don't have to have the rework. You don't have to say, oops, we forgot X amount of requirements or we didn't understand exactly what we're looking for, and then you have to submit an SPR, you have to ask for more money. So that intense, deliberate planning is so very, very important. And I know this is it's a change in how we think about what we do and how we do it, but we've had a couple projects, proposals get through the process already, and it is working. Now, we've had some missteps, but we're fixing them. And as we find those, we change things and we try to adapt so we can make this more efficient. So a lot of people ask us, well, when can I get money to help me? Because I'm a small department and I don't have the resources to put together all this. So once you submit an S2AA and our core team starts working with your core team, and what that means is what we require from departments is at least the PM, a staff person from the IT shop, and a staff person from the business side. That's the minimum on your side. From our side, we have our architect, ISO, we have procurement, we have ITPOD, and we have the Department of Finance. And we work as a core team to work with your team to get through this process. So at that point, we have an understanding of what you're looking for and what you're asking for. So at stage 2, you actually are able to submit a BCP for the planning portion. That means stages 2, 3, and 4. That doesn't mean the whole project. Now, we get departments to do that, and we say, well, nope, you don't have a project yet, so it's the planning portion. And we determine that by what your needs are for your SMEs, your business areas, how many business area people you're going to need. Some departments, they actually understand that their old system had 5,000 requirements, so they're able to estimate what they're going to need and what they need to do. Now, it needs to be reasonable. So we just got through the BCP process, and I'm reading some of these BCPs, and there's 18 pages of how important this is, and their justification is it's important. And that doesn't get it. You really have to justify why you need these resources and what they're going to do. And what we look at is reasonableness. It says, okay, it's reasonable they need X amount of folks to do this kind of work. And then we'll support you with DOF, and even if there's questions, then we now actually sit down with the department and DOF and work through it and understand why you need this many folks. And it's not like it used to be, well, I'm asking for 20 people, well, that means you need 10, so we're actually going to approve 10. It doesn't work that way now. We're really working together with the departments to figure out what you need to get through this process because we want you to be successful. So one of the things I tell my folks is we're like the CIA. If you're successful, you're up on the podium, everybody's clapping, we're in the audience, no one knows. If things go wrong, we're at the legislative hearing, you're sitting there, we're right next to you. I'd rather be in the audience clapping for you. And that's pretty much it for me.
Not for you. We know you could go on forever about this stuff.
Actually, you're right, because it is very exciting changing the way we do business. It really is. But I'm only 35, so this gray hair came in the last 3 years.
And actually, I want to